Friday night was supposed to be, and it really made me sad. It was just meant to be. Emily and I were planning to go to the Ivy, a place we often went with our friends. I wasn't in the mood to socialize, though. Work had been eating at me, and I just wanted to stay home. I wanted to relax at home with a cold one and binge-watch something mindless. But Emily was insistent that we get out. She said, "More Jack." She was already slipping into her sleek black dress and applying her signature red lipstick. Her tone was firm. It was clear that there was no room for debate. By the time we arrived, the place was buzzing with excitement. Our usual group was there. Chloe, Emily's best friend, was there as always, and she was as lively as ever. She's always a bit dramatic, but in a good way. Jason, the jovial joker, and a few others who joined in the fun. Out of the circle, Emily, as usual, she stole the spotlight. She was like a graceful swan, gliding through conversations, laughing and leaning. She was a bit too close for comfort, though. She was the life of the party, making everyone around her happy. She had a magnetic charm about her. She was aware of her charm. I tried to join in, but she was so charismatic that I felt like I didn't quite fit in. But it was like I was invisible. Every joke I told. But no matter how hard I tried, nothing I said was as funny as everyone else's. I tried so hard, but nothing I did worked. I tried to start a conversation, but it just didn't seem to work. Emily would chime in with something clever. She'd always redirect the conversation back to herself. It wasn't unusual for her to dominate the conversation, and I understood that she was doing it to protect me. The room. But tonight she felt different.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
But tonight she felt different. Her laughter rang out, filling the room with joy. Her touches lingered, and her laughter echoed through the room. Her laughter resonated longer, and her presence lingered more than usual. I couldn't help but notice her eyes didn't land on me. She even looked at me once. Then, as the night went on, I saw that her phone was lying face down on the table. It was on the table. It was buzzing. It was buzzing intermittently. Each time, Emily would glance at it and smile. A smile that I hadn't seen directed at me before. It was like she was smiling at me for the first time in months. But she did pick it up, and that was a really nice thing for her to do. She just let it buzz around. Its humming presence, a comforting, familiar sound. It was as if she was relishing the moment, as if it was a special, private moment just for her. I jested, of course. I asked, "Who keeps texting you?" Trying to sound casual. Emily didn't even. I looked up work stuff. At this hour, too. She finally glanced up. Her eyes met mine, and they were a bit cold and dismissive. "It's just a campaign. Deadlines don't clock out. Jack, let's try to be gentle with each other." I let it go, but something felt a bit off. It's in my gut. Then came the toast. Emily jumped up, making a clinking sound with her spoon. Everyone turned to look. She turned toward everyone. We all expected her to share a funny story or one of her usual sharp-witted roasts. Instead, she raised her glass and said to Jack, the man who, well, honestly puts up with more than, "We should all be so patient. Cheers to patience." The room fell silent, and I felt a warm sense of admiration for her. After a moment, Jason broke the silence. A forced laugh. The others followed suit. I, however, couldn't join in the laughter. I was frozen. Her words weren't playful. They were pointed, dripping with some inside joke I wasn't privy to. I felt like I wanted to say something, but I also didn't want to cause any drama. But the room was watching, waiting for my reaction, so I put on a smile. I put on a smile and raised my glass. I focused on my glass. On the inside, I felt like I'd been slapped. When she finally sat down, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I leaned in close. What was going on? She didn't even flinch. "Relax, my dear. Jack. It's all in good fun. You need to take a breath and relax. It's just a joke. And it's not fair to feel so embarrassed about it. It's embarrassing to have our friends there." Before she could respond, then her phone buzzed again. She quickly grabbed her phone and typed as she moved her thumb across the screen. "I'm craving some fresh air," I said to her. I got up and went outside. The night air felt refreshing. The sounds of the bar gradually faded as I moved further away. My mind was racing. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was just being. I felt a bit paranoid. But that toast-it just didn't feel right. Before I could even process it, I felt a sense of urgency. It was a strange thing to happen. Then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Emily. She asked, "Are you okay? You know I love you, right?" I looked at the screen, my pulse quickening. Those words, they felt hollow, wrong. Felt like she was trying. Felt like she was trying to soothe me, but it wasn't quite hitting the mark. She was trying to show me she cared. For the first time, I didn't say anything. I could tell there was something up, and I was determined to figure out what it was. After Emily's somewhat lackluster text, I strolled back into the bar. The air inside felt different, felt like a whole new space. It felt like everyone knew a secret, but no one said anything. I felt like the odd one out, like I was the only one who didn't have a secret. Emily was back at the table, her phone sitting there, just waiting for her. She seemed a bit distant, as if she was in her own world. She was having a deep conversation with someone. She was having a nice chat with Chloe. She'd catch my eye every now and then with a curious blend of warmth and concern. It was a curious mix of amusement and empathy in her gaze. I wasn't supposed to overhear it, but I did. Jason gave me a friendly nudge. He gave me a friendly wave. "Jack, my dear." He motioned for me to grab another drink. "You look like you've seen a ghost. You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't help but laugh and waved him off. He was on his way to the bar, where he ordered a whiskey to calm his nerves. I couldn't help but notice Emily. Her laugh rang out over the crowd, sharp and pointed. It wasn't for me. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to find it. I was on the verge of a breakthrough. Her facade. I was searching for a hint, a subtle clue that would explain why everything suddenly felt so off. And then I saw it. Chloe kindly slid Emily's phone across the table. Emily looked at it for a moment. Then she quickly turned. It faced down again, biting her lip as if she felt like smiling, but she held it in. I couldn't take it anymore. I strolled over, my heart beating with excitement, and leaned in. "We're leaving now." Emily looked up, her expression warm and inviting. She looked at me, her face a picture of confusion. We had just arrived. "Don't be such a scaredy cat." Chloe gave her a playful smile as she took a sip of her drink. "Oh, come on, Jack. Let her enjoy herself. She's been working so hard lately." That pushed me over the edge. "Emily, let's go. Or I will." She rolled her eyes at me. She tossed her napkin onto the table. "That's okay. If it's that important to you." We left without saying goodbye to anyone. Her heels clicked as she walked away. We walked to, our footsteps making a sharp, almost audible sound against the pavement. The car. The silence between us felt heavy, as if we were each carrying our own private weight. When we finally got in the car, she crossed her arms and stared out the window, like a scolded teenager. "What's going on, Emily?" I asked, my voice gentle. I finally asked. She looked at me, her eyes full of concern. They narrowed. "What's going on, sweetheart?" "Don't play dumb, Emily. I mentioned the toast, the texts, and how you've been acting for weeks." "What's going on?" Her lips curled slightly. She smiled, though it was a bit cruel. "My dear Jack, you're so..." She felt a twinge of concern. "I know not everything is about you, you know." I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles were sweaty. "Then what is it about? It sure feels like you're hiding something, but I don't mean to pry." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned her head back to the window, dismissing me. She was completely ignoring me. I bit my lip and started the car. When we got home, Emily went straight to the bathroom. She locked the door behind her. I stood in the living room, my gaze fixed on her purse, which she had carelessly tossed onto the couch. My hands were, I could feel them shaking. My mind was racing. I don't know what came over me, but I opened it. But her phone wasn't there. Of course, she had taken it with her. But her work tablet was right there. It was unlocked. I paused for a moment, my conscience whispering to me. I thought to myself, should I stop? But that little voice, the one that said, you already know something's wrong. Jack, my dear, just confirm. It was louder. I opened her messages. But there was nothing. Her email was all work-related. I was about to close it when I noticed something. But then, I caught sight of an app one didn't recognize. It looked like it was just something innocent. I looked it up. It was a name I didn't recognize. It looked familiar, like I'd seen it before, but I couldn't place it. I gave it a tap, and my blood started pumping. It ran cold. The first message was a bit unsettling. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and it came from a place that felt like home. I saved it. Last night was just perfect. I can't stop thinking about you, Emily. I'm with you, Emily. I scrolled up at the same time next week, and my hands were shaking a little. The messages were. It was so blatant. They were so obvious. It's hard to see how anyone could misinterpret them. It was so obvious. I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. Every line was like a dagger, confirming what I had been too afraid to say out loud. Then, I heard the bathroom door open. It opened. Emily walked into the living room, drying her hands. She was drying her hands on a towel. She stopped suddenly when she saw me holding her tablet. She saw her tablet. Her eyes darted to the... She looked at the screen. What are you doing? She asked, her voice a soft blend of surprise and concern. She asked, her voice a bit sharp. I stood up, my chest heaving. Emily, what is this? I gently took hold of the tablet. Out the messages glared. I turned back to her. Her expression flickered just for a moment. But then her face settled into a cold expression. She looked a bit distant. She crossed her arms, her lip curling into that same cruel smile. Are you seriously going through my stuff now? Oh, Jack, you're such a tease. Don't even think about turning. This is on me, she said, her voice a soft growl. Emily, please tell me you haven't been lying to me this whole time. Weeks? Months? Her silence was palpable. Then she shrugged, her tone icy. Does it matter? That was the moment my world felt like my world shattered into a million pieces. Her words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to. They hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Does it matter? I looked at Emily, trying to understand what she had said. My chest felt tight. My hands were still. I held the tablet tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me afloat. I felt myself upright, my body on the verge of tears. I wondered what that meant. Emily? Of course it does matters. She gave me a look like this was a bit of a nuisance for her. Jack, don't worry, Jack. You're overreacting. It's not a huge deal. It's nothing to lose sleep over. I could feel the heat rising. It was rising in me. Face. It's all good. You're sneaking around behind my back. I'm just chatting with a guy about whatever is. I know you don't think it's a big deal, and that's okay. I can see the smile on her face. She's returned. It's a bit sharp, and it comes across as a bit condescending. Okay, fine. You want the truth? Yes. I've been seeing someone, and I'm not sure why you're asking. I'm genuinely surprised. You've been checked out for a while, actually. I took a step. I'm back like her words had physically. It really hit me. I've been checked out. I'm sure you can imagine how that made me feel. I've been working my heart out to keep this house, to keep us together. This house, this life, us together. And you're just doing this? I gently held up the tablet. I'm shaking it for you. I'm trying to emphasize something. Emily just gave me a shrug, completely unfazed. I wish you'd pay a little more attention to me, because then I wouldn't have had to do that. Just look elsewhere, if you please. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I put the tablet down on the coffee table, and you could hear the sound of it reverberating through the room. I'm not going to let you blame this on me. You made this choice, Emily. You decided to lie. You chose to betray me. I'm sorry, Emily, but that's on you. She didn't flinch, her expression telling me everything. She was completely composed. Oh, don't be so self-righteous. Come on, Jack, time to act. We all have our flaws, and you're no exception. You've been so preoccupied. I know you've been so busy with your job, and I'm sorry I didn't realize how unhappy I was. I'm not sure how we can communicate better. I miss our conversations and the way you made me feel. I miss our conversations and the way you made me feel. What did you expect? I was shocked by what I heard. I was so disappointed. You could have just talked to me, Emily. I would have loved to hear how you were feeling. You didn't have to end our marriage because you were feeling. I felt like you were neglected. Emily, I'm sure you were just having a bit of a laugh, and I totally get it. It's understandable. I'd love to talk to you. Please, Jack. You don't listen, Jack. You just nod and go back to your emails or whatever else you're doing. I know you're busy, Jack, but I need you to listen to me. Look, we've been through this. It's hard to see what's right in front of you sometimes. Isn't it? It's hard to see when you're in the middle of it. Her words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. My legs gave out. I felt myself lose my footing. I sank into the seat. I sank into the armchair. I stared at her, unable to believe it. So that's it. You've decided it's over. And instead of, you could have just told me. You've been sneaking around behind my back. I'm wondering, Emily, was it the right decision? Was he worth it? For the first time, she felt a bit unsure. She seemed a bit unsure. She looked away, her jaw dropping. She felt her jaw tighten. I don't owe you an explanation, she said, her voice gentle. Like hell you don't, I shouted, standing. She got up again. Who is he? Please tell me. It's me, she replied, her voice soft and warm. She paused for a moment, as if thinking hard, and then let out a long sigh. It was as if she was tired of the whole conversation. That's okay. If you really want to know, that's okay. It's just from work. I knew him. He was in the marketing department. He was a really great guy, Emily. She mentioned him to me before. She always described him as someone special. He was harmless and kind. My fists clenched at the memory. I thought of him. He was a bit smug, but he was kind, oblivious. I was texting my wife while I was working so hard. He's just trying to keep us afloat. Matt, you're so lucky to have someone like that in your life. My voice quivered with surprise. Emily smirked. He listens to me, Jack. He makes me feel appreciated. It's clear you've forgotten how to do that. Her words were venom and I was choking on it. I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure how he can appreciate you. He's using you, Emily, just like you're using him. You're using him just like he's using you. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid this is going to blow up in your face. And when it does, I'm afraid you're going to come crawling back to me. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to take you back. She looked genuinely. She looked angry, but I understood. You think you're so great, don't you? You think you're some kind of model husband, but you're not. Jack, I'm sorry to break this to you, but you're not. You're not the most exciting, and sometimes I find you a bit exhausting. I needed something more. I felt like I was losing my footing. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was a complete and total betrayal. It felt like the very foundation of our relationship was crumbling, and it was disheartening. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Couldn't believe it. You've destroyed us, Emily. And for what? For someone who's... She's probably already planning her next fling, she said with a shrug, her indifference making it hard to understand. Returning. Maybe he isn't. At least with him. I feel so alive. That word echoed in my mind, mocking me. Get out, I said, my voice low and gentle. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. She shot up. Excuse me, she said. I repeated, Emily, please leave. Go stay with someone who needs you. Your precious Matt. Go feel alive with him. I'm sorry, but I really need you to just get out of my house for a little while. She seemed like she might say something, but she just looked at me, her eyes full of emotion. Then she grabbed her purse and her keys. She moved deliberately and slowly. I understood her need to go, so I let her. But don't think for a second this is all on me, Jack. You pushed me to do it. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just watched as she walked away. Out the door. She slammed the door. She walked out the door, and I watched her go. The silence that followed was palpable. It was so quiet, it was almost deafening. I sat back. I looked down, my eyes on the tablet on the table. The message remained. It was as if it was glaring at me, like a wound that refused to heal. It's as if it's saying, I'm not going to heal anytime soon. For the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly alone. The next morning, I could still smell Emily's perfume, a faint and comforting reminder of her presence. In the air, it was a gentle reminder of the life that had once existed there. It was as if she had been there just a short while ago. She walked these same floors, sharing this life. Now she was gone, off to wherever Matt was, I assumed. I slept. My mind was racing. All night, I kept replaying every moment in my head. Her indifference, her cruel smile, the way she walked out, as if this was just another petty fight and not the total obliteration of our special bond. Marriage. It felt like she'd been carefully orchestrating her exit. For months. It was heartbreaking, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness and confusion. I was caught up in the moment, and by 7 a.m., I couldn't stand lying in bed any longer. I got up, put on my old hoodie, and went to the kitchen. I hit the coffee pot. It was sputtering weakly. As it brewed, I stared blankly at the coffee pot, thinking about how I'd love to have a cup of coffee right now. At it, my mind wandered as I sipped my morning coffee. Was I truly that? Was I blind? Had I overlooked the signs along the way? Or maybe Emily just had a better understanding of the situation. Was she really good at lying? Then my phone buzzed. I reached for it, hoping for an apology, a sign of guilt, anything. But instead, it was a text from Jason. He asked, "Dude, are you okay? Last night was intense," he wrote. I didn't respond. What could I say? Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, stopping on Chloe's name. I had something in common with her. I felt a warm smile spreading across my face. The bar stuck with me. She knew. She had to. Before I could overthink it, I called. "Jack." Chloe answered, her voice sounding a bit tired. It was still early. "What's up?" "You tell me," I said. She replied, her tone direct and honest. "You seemed pretty cozy with Emily. Last night, that is. I'm just curious, that's all. I'm just curious about what's happening." After a brief pause, Jack let out a sigh. "Jack, I'm really not sure how I fit into this. This is between you and Emily. Chloe, please don't play hard to get. You two have been through a lot together. You've been her best friend for years. You two have been friends for years. You knew about Matt, right?" Another pause. This time it was longer. Then Emily confided in me. "I didn't think it was my place to. I'm here to listen if you need to talk." "So, you just sat there smiling like. It was like you were the cat who swallowed the canary. While she made a fool out of me." My voice rose, despite my efforts to stay calm. Chloe groaned. "Jack, please don't do this. You've got your side of the story. She's been feeling down for quite some time. It's hard not to see the writing on the wall." The words hit like a punch. It was like a punch to the gut. "It's hard to see, but we need to see it together. I mean, it's hard to see, you know? What are you even talking about?" "About?" She felt a bit overlooked. Jack felt like she didn't matter. "You were so wrapped up in your own world that you didn't notice her struggles. You were so busy living in your own world that you didn't notice her life falling apart. That's not an excuse." I lost my temper. If she was unhappy, I wanted to know. She could have come to me instead of running off. Some sleeves just ball up, you know? From work. Maybe she should have come to me first. Chloe said. Her tone was a bit sharper now. "But let's not pretend I'm not blameless here. Relationships are hard for Jack. I just couldn't take it anymore. You know what? Let's just forget it. Okay? Enjoy covering for her. You're just as bad as her. She is too." I ended up hanging up before she could. "Please respond." My heart was pounding. The room felt a bit smaller, as if it was suffocating. Chloe's words were still ringing in my ears. My mind was racing. They mixed with Emily's from the night before. Was I really the problem? Had I overlooked something so clear? But no, this wasn't my responsibility. I didn't do anything to betray her. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't lie, sneak around, or humiliate her in front of our friends. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve this kind of treatment. I felt my anger start to bubble up again, and I grabbed my phone, scrolling down to Emily's contact. My finger hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to. I felt like screaming at her, asking her what was going on. I wanted to confront the situation with her. She had made a mess, but I chose to send her a text instead. You're gonna come by and get your things. Just let me know when you're ready to come and get your things. I'm not sure I'm ready to see you right now. Please make sure I'm not around when you come. Her response came almost immediately. Emily, I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I'm not looking forward to seeing you either. That one really stung. It was more than I expected. Even now, she can't seem to muster up any regret or kindness. I gazed at the screen for a long time. The coffee in my mug was growing cold. The coffee in my mug was cold. It had been a long time since I'd felt this way. This whole thing had started. I felt something heavier than anger, heavier than betrayal. I felt a deep sense of grief for the life we built together, for the person I thought she was, and for the version of ourselves we had become. I felt for the version of me that believed in us. Even when the cracks began to show. It started to show. As the morning light streamed through, I felt a sense of warmth and affection for us both. The window. I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of an era. I had been who I was for the last 6 years. It was midday. The house was quiet, but my mind was racing. I felt restless, like I couldn't sit still. I tried cleaning and scrubbing dishes, but nothing seemed to calm me down. But they were already clean. It was spotless. I even tried folding laundry, but nothing helped. This house holds so many memories of Emily, and each one felt like a knife twisting deeper. The tablet sat on the coffee table, a silent specter. Its screen is dark now, but the messages etched into my brain last night remain. Amazing. Her reply. She said she'd be there at the same time next week. My hands shook just thinking about it. She'd planned to keep. This was going to happen. It was like our life, you know? But we were just getting started, and it felt like an adventure. It was like our life together was a backdrop, you know? I decided to start digging. I grabbed the tablet. Once again, I explored her apps, messages, and emails. I knew it wouldn't change anything, but I needed to do it. I was searching for answers. I needed to understand how far this went. I checked her calendar. The first thing that caught my eye was there were dates marked with little notes that said, meeting late, dinner, and office event. But something felt a little off. They didn't line up with the rest of her schedule. These didn't seem quite right. They were work events. They were just cover UPS. My stomach churned. I realized how much effort she'd put into deceiving me. And then there were the emails. Most of them were work-related, but a few weren't. Some of them caught my eye. There were a few from Matt, I'm really looking forward to tonight. Should we take separate cars again? Emily, we don't want Jack to get suspicious, right? I almost threw the tablet I almost threw it across the room. It wasn't just. Felt like a betrayal. Felt like a mockery. She knew exactly what was going on. She was doing. And she didn't care. But here's the thing, it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about how little it didn't matter to her. How easily she could laugh about the lies. I was sitting there, staring at my phone, when I felt it buzz with another message from Jason. Dude, you sure you're okay? We're here for you if you need anything at all. Jason, always the loyal friend. He was clueless about the depth of this mess. But I couldn't bring myself to explain it all. Instead, I replied, Me. I'm not the best at expressing my feelings, but I wanted to let him know that I was grateful and that I'd be okay. I wasn't going to be okay anytime soon, though. The rest of the day went by in a blur. At some point, I tried to eat, but I couldn't. I decided to just let my stomach take care of things. My mind kept going back to Emily, the lies, the cold indifference. I couldn't stop thinking about her eyes when she left. I couldn't understand how someone who had once claimed to love me could become this stranger. And then, in the late afternoon, I heard her car pull into the driveway. I felt a surge of panic. I was overwhelmed with emotion. She wasn't supposed to come back. Today. I hadn't had the chance to sort through all the feelings that were swirling inside me. But then the front door opened, and there she was, standing in the hallway like nothing had happened. She said, "I'm here for my stuff," her tone flat. I crossed my arms, staying rooted in place. "You could have at least called first." Her eyes met mine, and I felt a flicker of understanding. I felt a bit irritated. Her face. "I didn't think I needed your permission." "Permission, Jack. You didn't," I said gently. "I would have really appreciated a heads up. You made it pretty clear you don't want to. If you could just come see me, I'd really appreciate it. Remember?" Emily just gave me a little shrug and walked past me towards the bedroom. "I promise I'll be quick." I followed her, keeping my distance. But I couldn't help but watch her every move. She grabbed clothes from the closet. Her hands moved mechanically, and her expression was unreadable as she packed. I couldn't help myself. "So, that's it." There was no explanation, no apology, just her packing up like this is casual. It's like she's just moving on from a breakup. She paused, a dress in her hands, and looked at me. "Jack, I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say. I wish I could say sorry and regret what I did. But I don't feel that way. I did what I had to do. What you had to do." I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean lying to me, humiliating me, throwing our life away? I'm not sure I understand the reasons behind it." "A fling?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "You don't get it, do you? This wasn't about math. It was about me. I'm finally realizing that I deserve to be happy, and I'm grateful for that. You were never going to make me happy." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. It made me feel like I couldn't breathe. Out of me. "I'm not sure how you think this makes you happy. Sneaking. You think this makes you happy? You're not doing anything but lying and destroying everything we built together. We were together, you know." She turned away, throwing the dress into her suitcase. "I didn't come here to fight. I just want to pack up my things and leave." I stood there, feeling a bit overwhelmed. I was shaking with anger. I felt disbelief and anger. "You're a coward. Emily. You didn't do what you needed to do. You could have done so much more. It's like you chose the easy way out. Instead of fixing things, you ran. And I'm sorry to say that the worst part is, it's sad to see you not caring." I could see a crack in her for the first time. Her expression. It looked like she was feeling a bit guilty, but she tried to hide it quickly. She tried to hide it, but I could still see it in her face. "I believe you. I want you to know that I'm doing okay, Jack. But I'm done explaining myself to you." She zipped up her suitcase, grabbed it, and walked out the door without another word. I didn't follow. I didn't yell. I didn't shed any tears. I stood there, rooted to the spot, listening to the sound. It was the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway and disappearing into the distance. The distance. It was over, really over. But in that moment, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. In that moment, I felt a sense of release and understanding. I had a realization. I realized that I didn't just lose her. I lost the illusion of who she was. And maybe that's what hurt the most. The silence that followed Emily's departure wasn't peaceful. It felt as though I couldn't breathe. The house felt like it had swallowed me whole. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of, like her favorite mug, left on the counter as if she had just stepped away. The throw blanket. She had a habit of curling up and draping herself over the couch, and the faint, comforting scent of her. I could still smell her perfume on the bedroom curtains. I sat in the living room, staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been. It had been there just a short while ago. My thoughts were swirling, a mixture of anger and grief. I felt a sense of unease, as if something darker was lurking beneath the surface. I couldn't help but wonder, how had I missed this? How could I have been so unaware of the cracks she said were there all along? Along? Her words. They kept playing on a loop in my mind. head. I couldn't help but think, you were never gonna make me happy. I deserve to be happy, and I'm going to be happy. You've been pushing me to this point. It was frustrating, but I'm learning to let go. It's as if she's the victim in all this, as if I felt like I wasn't enough, and it made me feel like I had done something wrong. I just needed an outlet, anything to stop the thoughts from eating me alive. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. The cold evening air hit me like a slap in the face. I drove around without really knowing where I was going. For a while, I just let myself drive. I didn't mind where I ended up, and I was happy to just let the day unfold. The roads, the lights of the city blurred together, a symphony of lights and sounds. The city lights danced across the windshield, a mesmerizing spectacle. Eventually, I found myself at a stop. I parked myself. It was right outside a bar. It wasn't the Ivy, thank goodness. Thank goodness. It was a small, dimly lit place I'd never been to before. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of stale beer. It wasn't the most welcoming of places, but I didn't let that stop me. I ordered a whiskey and found a cozy corner. Booth. I kept my head down as the drink burned its way down my throat. I pulled out my phone. I really should have known better. Judgment. I opened Emily's social media. I saw that Emily hadn't posted anything. But she hadn't posted anything yet. No cryptic messages. She hadn't posted any quotes or carefully curated photos of her new life. But that didn't mean she wasn't out there. She might be out there somewhere. She was already working on the perfect. She was crafting her own narrative, her own story. Then, out of the blue, a thought struck me. I didn't hesitate. I started searching for his profile, and there he was, all smug and smiling, the kind of guy who probably spent more time perfecting his hair than doing actual work. His posts were the usual mix of gym selfies, marketing conference. He also shared a lot of selfies and a few pictures from marketing conferences. And, well, some cringeworthy motivational quotes. But, as I scrolled through, I couldn't help but notice something a little different. I noticed something, a post from. It was from last week. It was tagged at a restaurant. I didn't recognize it at first, but as I looked closer, I saw it was a post from last week. The caption read, "Great night with even better company. Wine glass." There it was, Emily's name tagged in the comments, along with a heart emoji. My grip on the glass tightened. My hand held the glass tightly, almost as if it would shatter if I let go. Shatter. This wasn't just a passing mistake. Felt like it was deliberate. It was deliberate. They weren't trying to hide it either. Anymore. It was a bit rough. "Night," a voice said, pulling me back to the present. I looked up, and there was the bartender, a middle-aged man with a weathered face. He was standing near the bar. He was standing near my table. He gave me a friendly nod, pointing to my nearly empty glass. He was gesturing to my empty glass. "You look like you could use another." I nodded, and he returned with a fresh pour. "Would you like to talk about it?" he asked, leaning against the table. The booth. Normally I would, but I've brushed him off in the past. But tonight I felt different. Couldn't hold it in. I confessed that my wife had cheated. On me, I said bluntly, with some guy from her office. He let out a soft whistle. He shook his head, looking a bit embarrassed. "That's tough, man. You confronted her." "Oh, I did, I said, feeling a bit bitter. It was clear that I was upset. She didn't deny it. She even acted like it was my fault, like I had driven her to it." The bartender. He frowned. His expression hardened. It's hard for people like that to take responsibility. It's easier to point the finger at someone else. Isn't it? I nodded, grateful for his words, even though they didn't dull the ache. "I'm not sure what to do now. She's gone. But it doesn't feel like it's over." He tapped the edge of the table thoughtfully. "It won't feel. It's up to you to decide when it's ready to move on. People like her, they'll drag you down if you let them. But don't let them. Remember, you've got the power." His words. She lingered as I finished my drink. And for the first time, that night, I felt a flicker. It was a beautiful moment of clarity. Emily had taken so much care. She had really gone above and beyond for me. She gave me her trust, her peace, and her sense of stability. But she wasn't. She was going to take my future. I left the bar feeling more hopeful than I had in a long time. I had never felt this way before. There were still. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. Divorce papers splitting up our lives. It was a time of transition, of letting go of the old and embracing the unknown. We'd have to deal with the unavoidable questions from friends and family. But one thing was certain, Emily had made her choice. Now it was my turn to make my own. I was ready to move on from being a casualty in her story. The next morning I woke up. I had a kind of clarity that only comes after you've hit rock bottom. Hitting rock bottom. Emily's words still resonated with me. They still stung. But something had. It's as if everything has shifted. She wasn't here to manipulate the narrative anymore, to twist my guilt. She was no longer driven by insecurities, but by a genuine desire to understand and connect with others. She was no longer using my insecurities against me. This was my story, and I was ready to share it with the world. Now, I had decisions to make. I had to make some decisions. The first call I made. I called a lawyer. I explained that I needed to start the divorce process. It felt a bit bitter, but it was something I knew I had to do. The lawyer, Claire, was no nonsense but fair. She asked me for the details. I told her everything. I told her about Emily's affair, how she'd coldly ended our marriage, and her lack of remorse. Claire didn't flinch. She listened carefully. Worse, but her composure and professionalism were exactly what I needed. Gather any. She asked me to bring any documents I had. She said bank statements, joint accounts, and property. Deeds. Anything that ties you together. Anything that shows the two of you were financially tied together. And if you have evidence of her, that would be really helpful. If you have any evidence of infidelity, that would be really helpful. If you have any evidence of infidelity, that could also help. This could really help in the negotiations. You could show her the texts from her phone. Matt, those messages on her tablet? There was plenty of evidence. I must admit, part of me hesitated, wondering if was it too cruel to use them against her? But then I remembered. Her laughter at my expense. She had dismissed me as a mere footnote in her pursuit of happiness. I wasn't going to play fair, not anymore. With Claire's support, I spent the next few hours spent digging through every shared memory, reliving the good times and learning more about each other. Document. I looked for every email and file that might connect Emily. I wanted to understand where we stood and where we were going. It felt clinical, like we were dissecting the corpse of our relationship. But you know what? It also felt empowering for the first time. I spent weeks going through all of our emails and files, and it felt good to have all the information in one place. It made me feel like I had some control over things. But then, the second strike. I sent Jason a text saying, "I need to talk." I asked if we could meet up. Of course, I said, "My place or yours?" An hour later, we met at my place. I was sitting on Jason's couch and I spilled everything. He listened quietly as he usually does. His usual joking demeanor was replaced with a rare seriousness. He was serious, but it was a rare sight. He really took the time to hear me out. When I finished, he looked at me with a warm smile and said, "I'm so glad you shared your experience." "It was that bad," I said. "Emily, she really did that to you?" I said, staring at the floor. And she didn't seem to care. She just walked away, acting like it was no big deal. It was just another day. Jason leaned back, gently running a hand through his hair. "That's cold, Jack. That's really cold, Jack. But you know what? You're doing an amazing job. You're doing great, Jack. I would have lost it." I gave a weak smile. "Oh, don't worry. I've had my moments too." Jason paused for a moment, then said, "You know, Chloe's been acting a bit odd lately too, right? I'm not sure if she's involved in this whole thing with Emily. I've noticed something a bit off about her." My stomach felt a bit queasy. Chloe, Emily's best friend, her confidant, the one who She gave me a little smirk the night of. It happened at the bar. She knew more than she let on. I had a feeling. I wonder if she knew? I asked. Jason nodded slowly, his eyes showing his support. If she didn't, I would be. I felt shocked. Chloe and Emily are thick, aren't they? They're like two thieves sharing a secret. If Emily was sneaking, Chloe was probably covering for her. That settled it. Chloe was next on my list. The confrontation. Later that day. Afternoon. I gave Chloe a call. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sparkling with joy and anticipation, like she'd been eagerly awaiting my call. "Oh, Jack, it's good to hear from you." I asked how she's been doing, and she told me all about her life in the drama zone. "Let's cut the crap, Chloe," I said, my voice a warm, reassuring tone. "We need to talk. We should talk in person." She paused, her tone playful. She faltered, her tone light and playful. "Course," I said, "what's on your mind? You know exactly what it's about." There was a brief pause on the other end and then a sigh. "Okay, whatever you need. Let's meet at the coffee shop on 5th. When I got there, Chloe was already there, relaxing with an iced latte and scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. She glanced up as I approached, her expression guarded. She set her drink down and said, "What's on your mind?" "Mind? You knew," I replied, sitting down across from her. "You knew about Emily and Matt, right?" Chloe didn't flinch. She leaned back comfortably. In her chair, she crossed her arms. "What if I did? What difference does it make?" Now, my fists, I'm keeping them clenched under the table. "It makes a difference because you helped her. You lied for her. You let her humiliate you. I'm grateful for your help, and I appreciate that you spoke up for me. And you didn't say a thing." Chloe let out a sigh, rolling her eyes. Her eyes. "Jack, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. Proportion, my dear Jack." Emily was feeling a bit down. She just needed to get away for a while. I didn't agree with how she handled it, but I knew it wasn't my place to intervene. "Not your place," I said. My voice was a little louder than usual. "You sat there laughing with her while she had lied to me. Face. How is that not your place?" Chloe leaned forward. Her tone was warm and friendly. Her tone was cold. "Look, Jack, I understand. You're hurt, but maybe you should. I know it's hard, but maybe try to understand why Emily felt unable to be honest with you. The first place. Relationships can be tough, and it's normal to feel confused or hurt sometimes. It's okay to not just fall apart for no reason. It's important to have a reason for everything we do." That was the last straw. I stood up, glaring down at her. "You can defend her all you want, Chloe, but when this is all, she'll move on to the next one and you'll do the same. The next escape. I'm not going to be the one to make you feel sorry for. You chose your side and I respect that." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. The sound of my footsteps echoed in my ears as I stepped into the cold air hit me like a punch to the gut. In that moment, I understood that not only had I lost Emily, but Chloe too. Or maybe I never really had her, but I didn't care. The pieces were falling into place, and I wasn't going to let them slip away. I felt like I was watching the story of what happened being rewritten by someone else. The days after, my confrontation with Chloe was a roller coaster of emotions. I felt so angry and betrayed. But now there was something else, too. It was a weighty mix of emotions. It was a mix of determination and resolve. This wasn't just. It was about surviving Emily's betrayal. It was about so much more than that. This was about so much more. It was about reclaiming my life. Piece by piece. Piece by piece. I dived headfirst into the divorce preparations. Claire worked hard to help me. She worked quickly and efficiently. She filed the paperwork, and I was so grateful for her help. She was so kind and helpful, going over all the paperwork with me and giving me advice every step of the way. She was so supportive throughout the whole process. The process was, it was a bit of a challenge, but we got through it. It was like unraveling, but for me it was a very important unraveling. It was like trying to untangle a complicated tapestry. Years spent weaving, Every account. It's like closing the chapters of a book you've poured your heart and soul into. Every little thing I had. I'd been so focused on making it, I hadn't realized it was also taking a toll on me. Every memory. They've been cataloged. Felt like dismantling the life I thought I had. And it was really hard. But the hardest part was the silence was the hardest part. Emily didn't call, didn't text. It was as if. Felt like she had just erased me from her life. It happened so suddenly. Like she had just erased me from her life overnight. Felt so easily and suddenly, like a bolt from the blue. She just up and left. She left behind a mess and so many unanswered questions. I had so many questions. Then one evening, I got a call from someone I didn't recognize. Number. Hello? I answered, my voice warm and friendly. I was a little cautious. Jack, the voice said. It was Emily. I grabbed the phone, eager to hear more. I held it close to my chest, feeling the warmth from the call. My chest felt tight. What do you want? What would you like? Her voice was so calm, so reassuring, almost detached. Claire sent me the divorce papers. I just wanted to let you know that I'll be signing them. I'm not trying to cause any drama, but I just wanted to let you know. This is all so we can move on from here. Her tone was so. She sounded a bit cold, didn't she? It was so cold and transactional, and it made me feel angry. That's all I can take. There was no explanation, no apology, just a quick. She just signed her name. And you're done, she sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. What do you want me to do? Say, Jack? That I'm sorry, but I regret. What happened? I'm sorry, but this was bound to happen. You cheated on me, Emily. You lied to my face for months. And now you're acting like this was some natural progression, like I deserved it. There was a long pause. I didn't want to fight, so I didn't call. I'm the one who's always reaching out to make things right. This is easier for me. You know, I'd love to give you the closure you're looking for. Okay, that's all right. I'm signing the papers. Let's get the papers signed. That's all there is to it. I understand that you're looking for some sort of resolution, and I'm happy to provide it. I couldn't help but laugh, a bit bitterly. You think signing a piece of paper gives me closure. But, I'm still left wondering, does signing a piece of paper really give me closure? Don't you think it just erases everything you've done? Her voice took on a harder edge. You're the one who wanted this behind us. Well, it's finished now. Stop dragging it on. Jack, it's time to go. It's really not fair to drag it out like this. And then she hung up. I stood there, taken aback. The silence of the call felt like a punch to the gut, cutting deeper than her words. This wasn't just a lack of concern. It was heartless. She wanted me to. It made me feel small and powerless. And for a moment I felt that way, but only for a moment. But it was only for a moment. It was a revelation. After the call, I paced around the house, her words repeating in my mind. Something wasn't adding up. If Emily was so eager to move on, why call it all? Why not? Just sign the papers and move on with your life. Was she done with it? And then I'm here for you, and I'm ready to talk about anything. She wasn't in control anymore, and I can see how much she hated it. Signing those papers wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of her control over me. That realization made me feel strong and empowered. I sat down with Claire the next day and we talked about everything. The next day, I met with Claire and we talked about every detail of the divorce. Settlement. I told her, don't let her walk away. I was hurt, but I kept it together. I said, my voice firm. She won't get to do that. Destroy my life and keep everything intact. Claire nodded, her expression warm and understanding. She was serious. We'll make sure this is fair, Jack. But she's prepared if she's as cold as you say. She'll fight back, but we'll be ready. And fight back she did. Emily had so many thoughts about the house, and she voiced them all. She even disagreed about the tiniest details. She even contested the assets. She even went so far as to contest her emails. Even Claire's messages were tinged with a touch of her own unique brand of sass. She was so kind and thoughtful in her emails to Claire, but there was a lot of venom in them. Claire even went as far as to accuse me of being spiteful. Claire even went as far as to call me petty. I didn't let it get to me, though. Not this time. It was a tough moment, but I'm glad I held my ground. A week later, I got another call. It was Chloe. She said, "I just thought you should know." Her voice a bit contrived. "Emily's been telling." She said that Emily's been talking to people you're trying to hurt. Her life. She says you're doing all this to hurt her. She says you're dragging out the divorce to punish her. She says you're dragging out the divorce to hurt her. I laughed, but it was a kind of sharp, humorless sound. Of course she is. That's just her way. Isn't it? She's playing the victim, making everyone else the bad guy. Chloe paused, then gently said, "Jack, I understand you're upset. You don't know anything. I lost my temper. You're just as involved in this as she is." So I said, "Don't call me." I was trying to pretend that I cared, but I couldn't help but feel upset. I ended the call before she could. "I'd love to hear from you." That night, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let Emily and her allies paint. I didn't want people to see me as the villain. I wasn't going to let them. I wanted to rewrite the story of my life. I opened my laptop, pulled up every piece of evidence I had, texts, emails, photos. I thoughtfully compiled them into a neat folder. It wasn't about seeking revenge. I didn't want to hurt her. It was to protect. I was thinking of myself. I just wanted to make sure the truth came out. I wanted to make sure that the truth was on my side if she tried to twist it. I'm sure she had the best intentions. And when I was done, I sat back and took a deep breath. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I felt the anger and the pain, but I also felt hopeful. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control. Emily could try to rewrite the narrative, but I wasn't going to let her. This wasn't the ending she wanted, but it was the one she earned. It's important to understand that this wasn't the ending she wanted, but it was the one she earned. 2 weeks later, the divorce negotiations got really intense. Emily, true to her principles. She wasn't just fighting to hold on to what she thought she was owed. She was fighting to maintain her autonomy. She was fighting for the story of her life. Her lawyer sent. In an email, her lawyer said that I was being vindictive and unreasonable, and that I was dragging out the process just to make her life miserable. I shared this with Claire, letting her know what was going on. Note, I told her, "We've got to use everything we've got." Claire didn't. I'm sure she was nervous, but I encouraged her to go for it. The next day, she submitted the evidence. Screenshots of. They showed the messages from Emily. They showed Matt. The calendar entries. But there was something fishy. The calendar entries didn't match her work schedule, and even the financial records showed she'd spent our joint savings on what I could only assume were their little getaways. By the end of the week, Emily's tone shifted. Her lawyer. She emailed a counter-proposal, one that was notably less. It was assertive. Claire couldn't help but smile as she read it. She shared it with a warm smile. It seems like someone's perspective has shifted. Of heart. But I wasn't. I was content, but I wasn't fully satisfied. This wasn't just about money or assets anymore. It was about truth. The dinner party bombshell. That Friday, Jason and a few others. Friends invited me over for dinner. They said it was just to take my mind off things, but I knew they were also curious. I could tell they were curious about the drama. Didn't matter. I really needed a night out, even if the thought of facing everyone felt exhausting. When I arrived, Jason greeted me with his warm, welcoming smile. He gave me a big hug. He greeted me with his warm, welcoming hug, and I felt right at home. "You're looking good. I'm glad to see you, my friend. You're looking better. You're like a new chapter in your life," I said, my voice warm with gratitude, thanking him. One day at a time. As the night went on, the wine flowed, and the conversation inevitably turned to Emily. It was Jason who. He started talking about it first, and he sounded like he was sharing a secret. "So Chloe's been running Her mouth, he said, glancing at her. He looked at me. Apparently, Emily's been telling people that you're out for blood. Let her. I replied, leaning back comfortably. I was sitting in my chair. She's got nothing left to stand on. Jason raised an eyebrow, but he was also a kind and compassionate person. You seem so calm about this. I've got receipts, I said. This earned me a few chuckles from the group. But the real surprise. Another one came when another friend, Lisa. She joined in the fun, and it was just the two of us. I ran into Matt. The other day, actually, she said. She sounded casual, but her eyes were so sharp. The room went silent. It was like everyone stopped breathing for a second. He didn't look too happy. Lisa kept her focus on her wine, her fingers gently moving as she spoke. Things weren't the same with Emily. Exactly. She was working out. I'm trying to be more upright. What do you mean? Lisa gave a warm shrug. He didn't say much, just that it's complicated. But he definitely didn't seem like a man in love. That thought made me feel so good. It was poetic. Emily had given up so much for Matt, and now even that was falling apart. But the rail. Then, to top it all off, Jason pulled out his phone. Speaking of, and receipts, he said, speaking of receipts, scrolling through them. He said, his messages, and then showed me. He handed me his phone. My jaw tightened as I read the screen. It was a screenshot of a message Chloe had sent him earlier that day. Chloe, Emily's totally freaking out. It looks like Jack's got her in a tight spot. She's worried he's going to ruin her reputation. Jason. She gave him a playful smirk. It looks like she's in a tough spot. She's nervous, and you can see it on her face. I handed the phone back. It was a curious mix of emotions. I felt a range of emotions, satisfaction and sadness, wash over me. Emily was unraveling, and part of me wanted to revel in it. But another part of me, the part that's still. I remembered the good years, the good times we had. The laughter, the love, felt a bit empty. The final encounter. A few days later, I got a call. It was Emily. I almost didn't answer, but I was curious and I decided to answer. I'm glad I answered. What do you want? She asked. I said, my tone a bit colder than I meant to. Her voice. It was uncharacteristically soft. She sounded so soft. Jack, can we talk in here? Person. Why? I asked. I could tell he was suspicious. I said my words because she said, hesitating. I owe you an apology. An apology. I didn't trust her, but I agreed. We met at a neutral place, and I'm sorry I didn't trust her. Spot. It was a park we used to go to when things were good. She looked different, more. She looked subdued. I could see that she was no longer as confident or as sharp as before. It was like she'd lost herself. I've been thinking about her a lot lately. She had her eyes fixed on the ground, as if she was lost in her own thoughts. Everything. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about us. I gently folded my arms. I didn't want to make things easier for her. I took you for granted. I'm sorry, but I've got to do this. She flinched, but I understood. I'm sorry. I understand that you might not be able to forgive me. I just want to say that I'm sorry for the things I did wrong. I just wanted to say sorry for the lies, for how I treated you, for everything. For a moment, I saw her eyes light up with understanding. I was at a loss for words. This was the apology I've been waiting for. But now that it was here, it felt empty. I really appreciate the apology. I said finally, but it doesn't change anything. You made your choices, Emily, and now we both have to deal with the consequences. We both have to live with the consequences of our actions. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I gently cut her off, saying, don't please. You don't get to rewrite this, not now. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw true remorse. But I couldn't give it much thought. I turned and walked away. I watched her stand there in the park, a ghost of the woman I once loved, and I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I felt a sense of ease wash over me. Emily had burned our life to the ground. Felt like she had burned our life to the ground. But from the ashes I was starting to rebuild. This time I was building something new, something better. I was determined to make something better, something stronger. Just for me. The finalization of the divorce was a quiet process, devoid of any dramatic courtroom battles or heated exchanges. It was just a few signatures, a few emails between lawyers, and then the official confirmation that Emily and I were no longer bound by marriage. When I got the email from Claire that everything was done, I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words felt surreal. Something I had fought so hard to save, and now it was just over. Instead of feeling sad, I felt so relieved. The weight I had been carrying for months, even years, finally lifted. It was like I was finally cutting ties with the past. The first thing I did was tidy up the house. I packed up every trace, every memory, every keepsake, and I held them close to my heart. I wanted to make sure that everything was just right. I gathered her clothes, the ones she hadn't bothered to collect. I even took her little trinkets and the framed photos. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to look at them. By the end of the day, the house felt emptier, but it also felt like it was mine. It was a strange feeling, but it felt good. I donated most of her things, but I held on to one box. It sat in the corner of the garage, taped shut and labeled with a heartfelt note. Her name, if she wanted it, that is. She could come and get it whenever she wanted. If she didn't come for it, I would leave it there for a little while, just waiting for her to discover it on her own. I thought that maybe she would want it, but if not, I figured she'd probably forget about it. Then I'd focus on something else. I was so focused on myself at the time. I started hitting the gym again, and it felt so good to be back in my element. I started hitting the gym again. Something I hadn't done in a while, and it felt really good to get back into it. It was a way for me to process my emotions and release the tension. It was a way to process the frustration I was feeling. But soon it became so much more. I started feeling. I felt stronger. It wasn't just a physical feeling, but a deep emotional connection as well. Mentally, too. Every rep was a step forward, a triumph over myself. It felt like a small victory each time I hit a new mile on the treadmill, a step away from the man I used to be. And with her, I also reconnected with the old me, friends, people I had neglected during my marriage. Jason was there for me the whole time, just like he said he would. He pulled me out and kept me going. We went to social events and made sure I didn't wallow. It had been too long. He said one night over beers, "There's life after." Emily. I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. You were right. The unexpected message. One evening, a few weeks later, the divorce it had all been finalized. That same evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I didn't recognize the number. "Matt, I'm reaching out because I'd like to talk." I looked at the screen, thinking about what to say. Of all the people I expected to hear from, it was Matt. Matt was at the bottom. He was at the very bottom of the list. But I replied anyway. I thought to myself, what could you possibly have to say to me? I'd love to hear your thoughts for just a few minutes. I was curious. One out. I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe. We met at a nearby coffee shop. I'm not quite sure what to expect, but I'm excited to see where it goes. I was excited to see what would happen. When I arrived, Matt was already there, looking a bit less smug than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale. He looked a little defeated. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "Make it quick, please," I replied, playfully crossing my arms. He nodded. He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly nervous. I felt a bit nervous. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I had no idea Emily was married. I'm sorry. And when I found out, I was so embarrassed. I should have taken a step back and let things play out, but I didn't say a word. I'm sorry for the silent treatment. She wasn't being honest with me either. I know. He kept going. His voice. It was a bit bitter, wasn't it? It made me think you were this horrible. He said, "My husband." that she was trapped in this miserable situation. Marriage. I believed her because I wanted to. My jaw tightened, but I stayed quiet. And now, he said, letting out a hollow laugh. Now I see who she really is. She's already moved on to someone else. She left me just like she left you. Felt so good to be proven right. Hear me out. I tried not to let it show, though. What did you do? Matt, I understand your expectations. I know it was tempting, but I'm glad you held yourself to a higher standard. On you? He flinched. The truth hit him harder than he expected. I guess I deserve that, he said quietly. I said, standing up. You did, but it's not my job to. I'll forgive you. That's your issue, not mine. I walked out, leaving him sitting there. He's a shadow of the man who had helped destroy my marriage. I'm looking forward. That night, I sat on my porch and watched the sun set over the horizon for the first time. It had been months since I'd done that. It was a moment of clarity, as if I could finally breathe again. I felt the anger and bitterness, but they didn't control me. I felt so much better. Emily was no longer with us. The life we built together was gone. But here I was, still standing strong. And for the first time, that felt like it was time to let go and move on. I didn't have all the answers, but I was ready to start over. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was ready to start the journey of discovering them. I wasn't sure what my next steps would be, but I knew one thing. I was ready to take charge of my life and be the best version of myself. I wasn't the same man who had stood by while Emily tore my life apart. I felt stronger, more resilient, and ready to take on the world. I'd grown wiser, too. I was ready to move forward with a newfound strength and wisdom. I was ready to rebuild. This wasn't the ending I had hoped for, but it was the one I needed. I needed this. As I watched the last rays of sunlight fade, I realized I had another realization. The best parts of my story were still ahead of me.